My name is Bob Bragalone, also known as Cowboy Bob, and I collect Dallas Cowboys memorabilia. I don't know why I started collecting for sure. I don't have a mom or a dad who was a big collector. I do have an aunt though. My aunt Nadia is a big collector. She collects dolls of all kind, and I'm sure that she had some influence on me as a young boy. But all I can remember is just from the early 70s, just loving the Cowboys and wanting to have a piece of them, and that piece grew into two pieces and three and then a whole collection. I would say what draws me to a specific object a lot of times is the rarity or the scarcity of it, and a lot of times it's the age. Things from the early 1960s when the Cowboys were a new expansion team, but they weren't yet America's team, and they weren't winning Super Bowls. I think those are some of the neatest items because they're rare, and there was kind of a feeling that nobody really knew what was going to happen with this team. A lot of times I will try to learn everything I can about an item because I'm going to be bidding on it. So I need to figure out what's it worth to me, how bad do I want it, how does it fit into the collection. And then a lot of times I'll acquire an item and it'll be years later that I'll learn something interesting about it just by virtue of talking to another collector or reading about it online or finding something else out about it that I didn't know. Probably the easiest and most common other tool to learn about objects is fellow collectors. And there's a whole kind of fraternity of Cowboys collectors out there that all love the oldest stuff, the Cowboy Joe, the early 60s, the 70s. And so there's a lot of guides that have been published, and there's just a lot of people that you can check with. So some of the more unique items that I'm trying to collect these days tend to be more one-of-a-kind items. And it's not everybody who's crazy enough to have Texas Stadium turf in their house, but I have one of the 50 markers, of which there were only two. And then I have the 40, which was closest to where Emmett broke the all-time rushing record at Texas Stadium. And by the way, he did it on this turf. So after Texas Stadium was no longer in use in 2008, they ended up tearing everything out of it, and seats and the roof even. After it was imploded in 2011, these items became available to me because I had friends and I would get permission to go down there and actually scavenge after they imploded the stadium. But before they did that, they had a big auction and they sold off certain things. And I always thought the highlight of the auction, and made sure I wanted, was the quarterback locker. So this was the locker that belonged to Roger Staubach in the 1970s and then Troy Aikman in the 90s. So apart from the turf and the Staubach locker, I've got a turnstile when you enter the room. I built my own custom Jerrytron with the 4 screens that are all operational. I have the goalpost pad from Texas Stadium that was wrapped around the goalpost, that's wrapped around my goalpost here. And then I have an older locker from the 1960s in the practice facility that preceded Valley Ranch. Got a player's bench from Texas Stadium that the Troy Aikman mannequin is sitting on over there. And those are kind of the highlights. So, a lot of people think that they destroyed Texas Stadium in 2011. They didn't. It just moved. Some people say there's a collector gene that, people have that unites us. I don't know about that. But what I do know from my perspective is that to me what makes it fun is that, number one, it's a hobby and it's something that I can enjoy whether it's good weather out or bad weather out. I have 2 sons now and a daughter, and it's something I can share with them, especially the 2 boys, and they're starting to get into it. But I think for me, when I think back on it, it reminds me of a time where I was a kid growing up in the 70s, and life was carefree and fun and easy, and the Cowboys were a perennial winner. And so it brings back a lot of fond memories from childhood.